Welcome to the Generations at Work podcast. This is a Maxwell Leadership podcast where our goal is to build bridges instead of walls between generations at work. On today's podcast, we're going to continue our conversation on the vulnerabilities of each generation that comes to work today. If you remember, if you listen to our past ones in this series, we've been talking about how the four primary generations that are coming to work each feel vulnerable to economic realities, to personal realities happening in their life, maybe their own individual workplace realities. But we often tend to not understand nor empathize with those realities. So we're talking with a Gen Zer, with a millennial, with a Gen Xer, with a boomer. And today I get to interview my dear friend, Randy Hain. Randy, help me right now. We have known each other for quite a few years. Do you remember how many years we've known each other?
You know, I think we're coming up on 19 years, Tim.
Yeah. We were just in middle school, I think, when we met. So not bad.
Anyway, on the playground.
That's right, exactly. So let me set up this conversation, listeners, and then, Randy, I'm going to begin to volley back and forth with you as a member of Generation X. So, listeners, just to catch you up, really the primary reason for this particular four-part series is to make sure that leaders understand the subtext and the nuances that might be happening in your office, in your workplace, and what's behind behavior. It may not be that Bob's mad at Nancy. It may be something that's happening at home, or maybe because of their life station. So for instance, you remember Generation Z feels a little vulnerable to AI replacing their initial job in their career. And many of them are changing their major in college and so forth, but that's a vulnerability. It's just good for leaders to know. For millennials, their big vulnerability, there's a number of them, but if you remember, we talked about many of them are thinking, gosh, the economy is so sour right now. Am I ever going to be able to afford a home like I'd planned? And for some, maybe not. So today I get to interview my friend Randy Hain. Randy is a member of Generation X, one of the earliest members of Generation X. Randy, that's not an insult. That's just a fact, okay?
Yeah.
So Randy and I have been dear friends. Randy has had an incredible career in corporate America. With Bell Oaks, he was a search firm. With Waffle House, you were an executive with Waffle House. And Randy, you now have Serviam partners that you act as a consultant, as a coach, you speak, you've written multiple books. All of them are so practical. In fact, just this morning we had breakfast and you gave me your two latest books. So I appreciate what you've done for corporate America. And let me just have you, would you mind just taking a quick minute, introduce yourself, and then we're going to talk about this great vulnerability of Gen X.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Thank you. And it was, I think you did a great lead in. A thing I would add to that is, I've been married to Sandra for almost 32 years, and I've got two adult sons, Alex and Ryan. But I was in corporate America for 25 years before I started my own business, and then I co-own another business called the Leadership Foundry. And I'm one of those few people that you'll meet that gets to do what he loves every single day, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, that's so good. You and I are in the same place in that sense. We love what we get to do, and we get to boss our calendar. Okay, so Randy, I know that you cannot represent all 48 million Gen Xers in America, but you are a member of this. So you're in the back half of your career, but you're not at retirement age. Gen X is considered by many social scientists as the heart and soul of the workplace. You are problem solvers. Many of you grew up as latchkey kids that had to pick the key up under the doormat when you were in school, open the front door after school. Mom and dad were both working. I'm not sure if that's you, but it was just, you learned to be self-sufficient problem solvers, and that made you very valuable in the workplace. So if you don't mind, I want you to just kick off. How has your perspective shifted since the beginning of your career?
I was raised by two really hardworking baby boomers. Both my mom and dad worked. My dad was born before World War II. My mother was born at the end of World War II. Okay. And I grew up in a house where work ethic and self-reliance and and owning it and ownership were kind of just part of how you grew up.
Yeah.
So I remember when I started my career, I was very focused on bringing those values that my parents had taught me into the workplace. What's interesting, the way you asked the question, is those things have not changed. I still employ those values that my mom and dad taught me to this day. But I think where I've really had to lean in on what my mom and dad taught me is I've had to be adaptable.
Yeah.
I have had to rely more and more on my own abilities.
Yeah.
And I say that because, I think when I was 21, I looked at company loyalty as a given. Oh, I'm going to be loyal to the company's going to be loyal to me. You and I both know that sadly, that's not really the case.
Wow.
It's one of the things that led me to start my own business 14 years ago. So I've had to make a shift from company guy, loyal guy. I'd give you my right arm to I'm very loyal, but I also have to take care of my family and be responsible. So I think shifting to an entrepreneurial spirit, but still living in those values my mom and dad taught me, are the two things that strike me as interesting for what you asked.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I want to double click on something. You are a loyal person. I know you to be that, but you have just described a very adaptable mindset that you had to obtain along the way. Talk about how it's possible to be loyal to a company and yet still practice self-care, still take care of yourself. And I feel like you strike a great balance there. You're not selfish, but you do take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Would you just talk about how you be loyal to yourself and to the organization at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to double click on. In my view, and I can't speak for all Gen Xers, of course, is I think we all have to take a hard look at the fact that companies are they're unemotional, they're sort of people agnostic. They're there to make a profit. They're there to take care of clients, but they're not there to make you happy. They're not there to bring you joy. Now, if you can find happiness and joy in your work, great for you. But they're not there to necessarily be your caretaker. So I think that you look at a job in a company as a place where I can learn, grow, add value, learn new skills. Which I've done all of those things. But at some point, and it's happened to me at times in my career, you get to a place where I can no longer learn from the organization, or my skills may have exceeded what the company's offering. Maybe I got a better opportunity, certainly in a different organization, which has happened to me. So I will absolutely give 150%. But at some point, you get to a place where the road diverges, and I'm comfortable. And it's certainly doing the right thing and being responsible and giving good notice and all of that to my previous employer. But I have been comfortable leaving and going on to other things throughout my career, but I've done it respectfully and professionally.
Yeah, you have. In fact, I want you to say one more quick thing before I go on to the official question 2 here. I think you're a good example of someone who has finished well. You've gone through different seasons of your career. I described a little bit of that. How have you, for listeners' sake, how have you finished well at each station where you moved on?
I think it's good to kind of back up and look at what was my mindset going into each opportunity. I am a voracious learner, and I always had the mindset, I want to learn everything that I can. I'm going to work really hard, and I want to grow as fast as I can. Now, obviously, as I got older into my late 20s, then it became about supporting my family and taking care of my family, of course. But I think when I got to the place when I felt like I was no longer learning and growing, that was usually the sign that I probably needed to move on. So I would give it all I've got until I felt like I was becoming stagnant, which happens to all of us. And then I would just have mature conversations with my boss, with the company, and just talk about what's a great way for me to exit, leave with my head held high, leave you guys in a great place, and then move on. I've done that everywhere I've been, and I'm very proud of that.
That's good. That's good. And the lead time and the conversation are both so good. I was just talking to a coaching client earlier today, and she wants to finish well, but she sees changes in the wind. And I said, I tell you what I've always done. I worked for John Maxwell for many. I sat down way ahead of time, and I said, John, I promise to finish well, and I promise to hand off my responsibilities well, if you'll trust me. And the time span, Randy, between the time I announced my first departure from working for John to the time I actually left was between February and September. That's almost unheard of. But
Right.
with a trust level that was built through conversation and competence, I hope. But anyway, I appreciate you answering that.
Tim, one thing I would add to the first question you asked me that what you just said brought to light for me was I think the thing that I also learned from the beginning of my career, certainly probably in the third, fourth, or fifth year of a long career, is to anticipate and expect disruptive change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know what that was till it hit me over the head with a 2x4. But once it happens to you, you start to anticipate it. And I would say to anyone listening today, you should expect disruptive change. AI is the buzz now, but every stage, every generation goes through that disruptive change to your career. I've been through it many times, but I've come to expect it.
Yeah. So that's a great lead into my next question. Realizing that you cannot represent every member of Gen X right now. There's people listening from Gen X saying, wait a minute, that's not my story.
Sure.
But as a representative, someone who's just crossed into the 60 and over club, which you mentioned at breakfast today, what do you think are some of the gifts that your generation gives to organizations that maybe the boss might have forgotten or just never knew? Would you mind just speaking on behalf of those seasoned veterans that we know as members of Generation X?
As you say, I can't speak for 48 million people, but I can speak to my experience, but also the network I have of fellow Gen Xers.
Yeah.
It seems like there are countless similar stories about being raised by hardworking parents, bringing those values, the work ethic, the sense of ownership, the self-reliance. There was no room for a victim mentality. It's on you. You own it. Go take care of it. Again, that ownership thing. I come back to those values and those valuable skills. Tim, I'll tell you this. It's a true story. My father, when I was 10 years old, gave me a used lawnmower for my birthday and helped me start a grass cutting business.
Oh my gosh.
It was the best thing ever. Now, at the time I said, Dad, that's kind of lame. I wanted something else.
Yeah.
But he taught me how to be self-reliant. I didn't ask for allowance money after the age of 10. My point is, a lot of Gen Xers I know bring that mindset to the workplace. Wow. And we are maybe that quieter generation. The boomers are exiting loudly. Gen Z is coming in loudly. And millennials and maybe our generation is just kind of out there steering the ship, taking care of business, getting things done quietly. But we're kind of a bridge to an older generation, maybe passing on those lessons. As you say, I think we're really good at problem solving. And I certainly think, to our earlier point, we're very adaptable. We have been through massive change. And I think those things make us valuable team members and leaders in your company.
I think you're right. In fact, I'm just thinking about the history that went on from the time you were born to now. You've been through similar times economically that we're facing today. You can look back and say, I remember when this happened in the 70s when I was just a little kid, or 2008, and that's helpful to be able to look back and gain and have perspective because you've seen things come and go throughout your career. Yeah, that's good.
I remember watching 9/11 on TV. I saw the second jet hit the World Trade Center. I saw it. I've seen things like that. I lived through Y2K, which was a nothing burger. I mean, we've all been through things, but it's a lot when you kind of add it up.
Yeah, it's no doubt about it. Okay, here's the big question now. I want to talk about vulnerabilities, and you're in a very good place in terms of your role and your position. But you know that at your life station, there's some vulnerabilities personally and professionally. So for the sake of helping leaders listening right now, just better understand a Gen Xer on their team, talk about some of the vulnerabilities that might be there.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, can't speak for all, but when I kind of think about myself and maybe that circle that I run in, many of us are dealing with aging parents. My father is still alive at 87, and that self-reliant, hardworking man that would give you the shirt off his back is now very dependent in a very uncomfortable way on me and my sister. So I'm dealing with that. I've got adult sons, one who has special needs and one who is in his mid 20s who's newly married, trying to figure out his career. And it's a very different landscape from when you and I came up in business. So I'm trying to help my young adult sons thrive in today's very chaotic world. I'm trying to figure out, how to finish well. I do have plenty of years left. I plan to work into my 70s if I can, but I'm trying to do that in a society that really values youth. And I'm trying to figure out how to navigate all that. So those are three vulnerabilities that just pop out that really keep me up at night sometimes.
Yeah. And this is good. I think it's just good. My goal, again, in this series is creating a more empathetic leader out of you, listeners, right now. And just hearing Randy talk reminds me, gosh, I need to see him as a human, not just a worker bee who's got a lot of experience. So, Randy, one last question before I let you go. Any last thoughts? You're talking to anybody, of course, but particularly leaders. I have come to appreciate you because you are, in many ways, you're just a good man. You're a good human being.
Thank you.
You're a man of faith, but you're also a seasoned veteran. Any other quick thoughts that if you were having coffee with a leader that was wondering about those Gen Xers at work, any last thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I have been in this mode of thinking now for well over 15 years. I think that we have not only an opportunity, but an obligation to invest in the generations that follow us.
Yeah.
Our parents invested in us. We have hopefully thrived and done well, or we're on our way to doing that. But we need to be able to pivot and reach back to generations that are following. Yeah. And I don't mean in a, I'm gonna like your post on LinkedIn. I mean actual show up and engage, and don't just lecture but listen. Spend time with Gen Z and the generations following. I spend a lot of time on college campuses. I wrote a book last year called Practical Virtue for that generation Gen Z, that early career professional. But I think we have that opportunity and an obligation to invest in them. And I think we need to be active, not passive. And I'll tell you what, you and I joke about this all the time. A lot of us have a tendency to be the old man wagging his finger. Get off my lawn. We need to abandon ship on that and engage, because they're not just going to run the world. They're slowly but surely doing it right now. And just like the boomers gave us that responsibility, we need to pass on what we know and learn from the generations following us. So that's my belief. And that's something that I share with your audience with a lot of sincerity.
Yeah, I love that thought, Randy. That's so where I am as well. In fact, you reminded me of Dr. Erik Erikson, the psychologist from 1950, who came up with the stages of behavioral growth or development. And stage 7 along the way is where you become generative. And that was simply his way of saying, I'm old enough now, I need to be looking back and saying, who's coming up behind me? And it isn't just about me and the new yacht or the new car or the new house, but it's me looking back and making sure the next gen is ready along the way. I so appreciate it. Well, let me just make some quick comments and then I'll let you all go. But I always try to wrap up after an interview like this with some big picture realities. So the Gen Xers, listeners, that are working with you, whether they're your boss or your colleague, these folks are veterans, and we need to keep that in mind. In fact, I think there needs to be a level of respect. That's my opinion, but a level of respect for the veterans at work today that are indeed the heart and soul of the workforce. They've been steady for many years. Not all, but most have. And their vulnerabilities involve burnout a little bit, family and work responsibilities. So let me just bullet this real quick. Randy brought up having to care for an 80-something dad and 2 young adult sons. So Gen Xers are often called the sandwich generation. They're not just sandwiched between millennials on the other side and boomers on the older side, but they're sandwiched between caring for aging parents and young adult kids who might still need their help. That may show up at work, where there's maybe a little bit of a stressed look on their face, or they feel a little bit of pressure outside of the task they're working on. That situation could just lead them to need a little extra listening ear. Growing up Generation X was known as latchkey kids. I made reference to that earlier. They're the ones that maybe both parents were working for the first time as Gen X grew up. Mom and dad both might need to have a job just to make ends meet. And I know Gen Zers are feeling that today again. But so Gen X might have come home, found the key to the front door under the mat, let themselves in the house. Mom had given instructions, perhaps. Do your homework before you watch TV, mow the lawn or take out the trash. So Gen X, in many ways, not all but many, learned to be responsible and self-sufficient. And I think that's something that every organization could take advantage of in a good way. Here's another vulnerability. Many Gen Xers that I've interviewed feel that ageism and discrimination are issues. In other words, a Gen Xer might have been around long enough and performed well enough to get a promotion, but maybe that promotion went to a younger generation staff member or employee because they're going to be around longer. And we want to invest in the future. And the Gen Xer goes, yeah, but I've earned this. I'm not saying what to do. I'm just saying that may be a tension they feel. And their future isn't as long as the Gen Zers is, very, very likely. And then one last thing. As I interview Gen Xers in focus groups, many, in fact, millions of Gen Xers feel the stress that comes from managing teams in a pressurized work environment. We just feel that pressure today. Probably you'd say it's always been around. I just think it's more today. I think people are more anxious today. They're more stressed today. In fact, the data shows that. So many of the Gen Xers reported burnout in my research as a problem. They feel they need to give their very soul to the job, when in reality, they're looking forward to maybe one day I'll get to stop working. They can feel overwhelmed with this ever-changing workplace. That's true for every generation. But I guess, once again, I'm just wanting you, listener, to be thinking, how could I lead with empathy and compassion for this great, steady, long-term worker that's been around for a while? So I hope, listeners, this has been helpful today. Randy, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Tim.
Randy, how can they find you? Talk real quick about maybe where they could find you.
Yeah, sure, Tim. Two best places would be LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. Also, serviampartners.com is my website. And all my books are available on Amazon.
Great. Excellent. I appreciate that. Listeners, if you would like more help with managing different generations, go to Maxwell Leadership /generations at work. There are resources there. You can even make a call and find out how to get help with a workshop or coaching on this very subject that's such a reality today. Thank you, listeners, for being with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you or hearing from you on our next episode.